Thanks for that introduction, Chuck. I really appreciate all the work that you do from across Manitoba and Western Canada. One of the first times I met Chuck, I was chamber president. I presented a resolution on Highway 283, which is a little road from the Paw going to Western Canada. It's an unpaved chunk of road. I submitted the resolution to Chuck, and he immediately bounced it back to me and said, "We don't do pothole repairs." And I said, "Chuck, just a minute, I'd like to explain this to you." By the time we got done in the conversation with Chuck, Chuck was sitting at a table with some federal politicians, and he said, "If you could fix one road in Manitoba, what would you choose?" And guess what Chuck said? Highway 283, and the next day the headline in the Globe and Mail was, "The top road in Manitoba to get fixed was Highway 283. Thanks, Chuck. So it was amazing to see those interactions that you have in your network and how you can get things done. And in the conversation today, as president of the Hudson Bay Route Association, I'd like to share some of the aspirations that we have as an organization. Our organization has been around for about 100 years. When the port was originally designed, it was a brainstorm of a couple of premiers that got together that really got the organization started. These are some of the goals and objectives of our organization, and primarily our focus is to advocate for the rail line and for the port and for the benefit of Canadians and people in the north. So it's kind of broad-reaching terms that we work with. Our members of our organization are about 100 municipalities from across 3 provinces. So we reach out to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, many First Nations in the north, and we've been part of a lot of the activities over the years involved in the railway. When the railway was washed out in 2016-17, we were part of the team that went down to Winnipeg advocating, let's get this fired up, it's a critical asset. In 2019, this group of individuals, which is our board, we have 20 members of our board, so pretty broad-ranging talent. The guy, top row, third from the right, he used to be the top salesman for Burgo Industries in St. Bruce, Saskatchewan, and sold billions of dollars worth of cultivators, lots of them exported to Russia. We've got some talent in the grain industry and various other components. So pretty impressive bunch of guys to work with, and we try to have fun when we do this. We work very closely with our Gateway Group and people that are involved in the railway, and we're trying to move things along. This is the Port of Churchill, and I know Chris spoke to you quite a bit about some of the things with the port. We're kind of proud of the asset that's there. The terminal itself does hold up to 100,000 metric tons, about 4 vessels of grain that can go in there, or other commodities. Right now, it's one of the biggest strengths that the port has, and I think as we move along, it's going to be a tangible asset. There's substantive interest from the grain industry to reutilize that port, and I think there's some business opportunities. So here's some stats, and if you look back, it goes a long ways back. That's the amount of grain movement that went through the Port of Churchill. And just to give you a little context, about 45 years ago, I wrote my thesis on grain transport and the Port of Churchill, based out of the U of S. We had the policy division of the University of Saskatchewan helped in the design and layout and some of the things that were included in the thesis document we put together. But if you look here, 2015, volume started to decline. 2019, we had a little bit of activity, 137,000 metric tons, so about 4 or 5 vessels went out. I think we're missing the boat in the grain side. I think we've got farmers that can by themselves load a shipload of grain, I think there's an opportunity to bring this back. I think there's interest. I live in the Paw, and right out of the Paw area, we have producers that can do this, and I think it's a matter of time that it happens. I'm excited to see the work that Arctic Gateway Group and the provinces have done to get this investment actually performing and doing what it's supposed to be doing. Here's some shipments that went out of the Port of Churchill at one point in time. And if you look on the right side, you'll see the countries that these commodities went to. Italy, they make great pasta. They ain't Durham, right? Spring wheat, typically a commodity that is utilized around the world. Western Canada has some of the best wheat that you can use for making bread. Very popular internationally. Ghana, Kenya, Colombia, there's lots of places you can move stuff through. So I wanted to give you as an example, the first ship-in celebration, the Clipper Bettina. They had a celebration on the ship. I happened to be there when that vessel was in town. We went onto the bridge. The captain served us a meal. We got to meet the crew. It was a very enlightening experience, and it was like the United Nations. The ship was out of Singapore. The crew was from all over the world, and you experience the dynamic of what it's like to do international trade. It was very inspiring, lots of fun. Oops. And I think the podium's coming apart. So, and I'd like to thank the Arctic Gateway Group for the invitation to bring our Hudson Bay Route Association up to when the ore ship came in for their sailing. It was a fabulous event. It was great to be part of it. This is a panel shot that I took off the bridge of the ship, and it shows the asset as it stands right now in Churchill, and it's quite a pile of work that's been done by Arctic Gateway Group to really get this up and functioning. The terminal itself, I think, is a concrete structure. It's got a few miles on it, it's okay, but really and truly, I've been inside it, I've been all the way through. As a former agrologist, that asset can go to work for us pretty quick. It's got a little bit of work to do inside, and I think the team up there is working on it, and it was very enlightening to see that. So we'd like to see that get up and running. The coverall shelter there that was put up to handle the concentrate, we're quite excited to have been part of the conversation that got some of that concentrate moving. In 2019, we held an AGM in Flin Flon. Federal Minister Jim Carr attended. We had an introduction between some of the folks from Hudson Bay and the group involved in the port. Mike Spence was there at the time, Christian Sinclair, some of the One North folks. And it was very inspiring to start that conversation, and then to see this finally come to fruition was quite inspiring. And I think as you move along, I think this is a very symbolic event. The same can be done for potash. Potash that would go to Brazil would be a huge market, and I think we continue to work on that. This is one thing that we attended back in, 13, in Winnipeg. They had a very good event by the World Trade Center. We were fortunate enough to attend that, and I want to give you this context. I put this map up because that route is more and more becoming some context of international scope. The US, Norway, Sweden, they're all saying, whose waters are those? Are they Canadian? Who has control of those waters? More and more that conversation is going on, but at Centralia, I bumped into a lady from China. She said, We're building ice-class container vessels. We started them, and this was in 2013. I don't know the production time, but they said they're probably going to be 8 years. I don't know how long it takes to build one of those. But we're very interested in running container ships through there. And would the Port of Churchill ever consider being part of that operation? And I went, wow. Okay, that really opened my eyes to why we should be investing and encouraging this type of development. So it's a great event. I threw this picture up, and this is when I did my thesis, and we're doing wheat. The circle reaches out, and it was supposed to hit about Rosetown, Saskatchewan. If you ship grain, if you're going to Vancouver, Prince Rupert, that's the economic dividing line, the economics given a perfect world. Grain can go either direction, and that's the catchment area of Churchill. So it gives you a scope of, if all the playing cards are in place, that's a dynamic that we have to work towards, because I think it's an opportunity, but I think it should be an inspiration to say, if we put all the infrastructure and the investment in Churchill, this can move things along. So I wanted to give you that dynamic. That was part of the document. Now, if you look at oil or energy or any commodity, potash, that circle is going to move in or out, depending on economics, competition, various things. But it gives you an idea of the prospect of what we should be looking for. So, this is another picture we shared, and I know Chris spoke of this, the investment that they did at the Port of Churchill. That's a picture of the ballast pile. 330,000 cubic meters of ballast. That was moved out onto the rail line. When you see the pile, it's just like, oh my goodness, the investment that's gone into that facility, absolutely remarkable, and well done, Arctic Gateway Group. Chris, give them a hand, because that's a big thing for the board. That's the busyness, that's the activity that was going on when they were generating that stuff. Big investment that went in there. So here's I'd like to touch on, and this is a commonality that happened a few years back, about, in April of 23. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta got together, signed an MOU. I'd sure like to see if we can continue that type of conversation, because honestly, we've got a couple landlocked provinces that are looking for places to ship and export their commodities, and it might be an opportunity. If we can continue and follow up on that sort of thing, I think there may be an opportunity to move this along. In our road association, we try to stick to a high level of the political optics so that we can try to develop policies and be engaged in policies that might move this stuff along. Here's another one, and I think Corey Young, you're in that one. Chuck Davidson, you're in this one. We did a trade mission up to Rankin Inlet. So you go right across the Bay of Churchill, from Churchill to the other side. And we did a tour there, and it was very enlightening. Rankin gold mine up there was just opening. They spent $2 billion, $1 billion a year, setting up that mine, one of three. They have some of the richest gold in Canada. They're called the Agnico Eagle, which is the mine that we toured. It's got some fabulous gold. I'll give you this context. In the gold mining industry, if you find 5 grams per ton, that's exciting. I looked at a core sample, moved halfway up, they had 35 grams per ton. And then they went to the other end of the sample, and it was 85 grams per ton. That gets any banker really excited. We went up and saw that. The context that we saw in the community was very, very enlightening to see, and we began to understand These are some of the opportunities that are presented in our Northland. Much of the supply that came in for this mine may have come through Manitoba, not much of it did, but I think those opportunities are presenting themselves. So that was an interesting one. Our Premier of Manitoba, I have to give Premier Moab Canoe high marks, declaring Manitoba a maritime province. Brilliant. I think that's something we need to acknowledge, follow up on. The interlinking that's begun with Centerport and Churchill. Love to see that conversation. And when you reach out to Centerport, Winnipeg, Bismarck, all these places, that complete interaction that we have between our seawater ports and our inland center ports, that freight movement, we have to develop that and make it seamless. I think it's something is very much worth working on, and I know the Premier actually popped into my office with a few other ministers at one point in time. I think it was before the election, but that really doesn't matter. And we had a very frank chat about this, and it was very enlightening to see the dynamic and the method that they would like to move this forward. Danielle Smith out of Alberta, back in 23, and I'll show you a letter here, she had encouraged provinces to work together. This was slightly after she got elected, and she felt that Churchill was a very, very interesting dynamic. And I think if you get a chance to read through the document, I'm not going to go all the way through, but I think there's an aspiration, whether it's energy or other commodities coming out of Alberta, they're very, very interested in that. So I think it's something that we worth entertaining. In the letter, she described movement of commodities out of Russia. And if you go in this area right in here, they're coming right in and moving oil out and other commodities. The ships move in and out. But that's in much the same waters that we're dealing with in Churchill. How come the Russians can do it and we can't? My question. So if we move that along, and I put these maps up because if you look at the various colors of the vessels here, you can click on each one. Go on the internet and look at it. It tells you if it's coal, if it's iron ore, whatever it is. But it's a great dynamic. It gives you a big picture of what's going on. In the Bay of Churchill, you can see some of the vessels moving around, whether they're fishing boats. I see a boat sitting up there about where Rankin Inlet is. Very remarkable to see the dynamic. You can go on it over the year, and ships move around. It's live. It's a good feed. But ultimately, here's a picture of this in Churchill. This picture was taken in mid-December. Those are the ice conditions. This was actually a live video forwarded by Mayor Spence to me, and he showed the icebreaker and what it looks like at that time. That's what an icebreaker costs. It's very expensive. You're looking at $7 billion. It's a big investment, but is it a big investment if it's a cost of doing business? And I think to make sure if we can look at extending the shipping season and enhancing insurance policies so that ships can come in and utilize that port the way it should be, it changes the whole dynamics of it. So $7 billion, in my opinion, is a big investment, but it's really not. I guess I jumped a little too far here. I missed Scott Moe in Saskatchewan. That wasn't by intent. Scott he's hitting on a lot of buttons these days. His canola price in Saskatchewan dropped $1 a bushel a week ago with the Chinese tariffs. And he immediately jumped up and said, you know what? We have to be aware of what our economic policies are because it affects farmers, it affects everybody in the supply chain. Scott has gone out, put his own trade commissioners in India and many of the other countries around the world. Remarkable, the dynamic that he's generated. His agricultural products going out of the province are over $20 billion, and he would love to have a deep water seaport. We have one. Can we get the conversation to work together to bring that to fruition? So ultimately, the last picture I'd like to show, that's the kind of shipping traffic that's going on out in the waterways right now. Churchill needs to be part of that. That's a picture from up in Rankin. I'd like to say I took the picture, I borrowed the picture, and that's a bigger one. That's a shot from Rankin Inlet. I'd just like to share that with you. That was taken from the shoreline, and that's how far the vessel is out in the bay, and they offload commodities and bring it in by barge. So I just want to leave you with that. I didn't get the cards either, Volker. Anyway, it was a delight to speak to you. I'm so inspired by the number of people that came up to Winnipeg and from around Canada, and thanks for the opportunity.